Welcome to Project Management. I'm Emily Hedrick, and somewhere my TA Pine is running around. Oh, there she is. She's currently cleaning herself. Great. So, I wanted to talk to you about requirements today. Now, this is probably a very tedious thing for many people, but it's probably one of the most critical points in project management because requirements act as a blueprint, a way for you to understand, okay, what is it that we're trying to accomplish. And so because of that, it requires a lot of documenting. And so a good project manager is always taking notes and understanding what it is that the team is trying to accomplish. So let's dive into it. Okay, so let's start out with our definitions. Now, there's usually two types of requirements. And so personally, I've never seen it go down this granular, but you could probably do that. So the first one is the functional requirements. So that covers the capabilities, usability, features, and operations of a product. Okay. Next, you have the non-functional requirements. So it's performance, stability, security, and technical specifications. So if you're thinking along the lines of, developers and things, in the more technical field, you're going to want to differentiate maybe a little bit. But for the most part, a requirement in the broad sense is essentially going through and understanding, okay, this is what the product has to have. And then some people might even put, this is a nice to have. And so it's up to you on how you want to do it as a project manager. The better and the more defined requirements leave a lot of the ambiguity out of the project. This is phenomenal. You want less ambiguity or gray area. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. So, how are requirements meant for you? For you as the project manager and the team? Well, requirements documentation acts as a point of reference for the growth of the project, all the parts involved. There's a lot of moving parts, and its final implementation. So, breaking that down, like I said, it's a reference point. So, as you're documenting and building the requirements, you know exactly what's happening. You're thinking, okay, I've got this app that needs to go out, but what do we need to do in order for it to go out? Because the goal is for it to be published, go out. Okay, great. We need to add more content, so that's a requirement. And then we need to improve a lot of the bug fixes, so that's a requirement. And in its final implementation, let's say some of the app design isn't looking like the app design with the other apps. Let's say you have a couple of apps. You want it to be all looking the same look and feel from a design perspective. So that could be 3 requirements right there. So this is important for your team because they go, oh, you're telling me we need more content. Great. We will start looking and building more content. That's a requirement. Now, what does it mean for the client? Now, this is essentially the blueprint part. This is for them to understand, oh, yes, we are on the same page because what I have defined here is requirements documentation for the client acts as a blueprint for clients to better understand the outcomes of the project. Because many people can go into a meeting and go, here's what we would like to do. And everyone's like, oh, this is great. This sounds, oh no, like maybe this isn't what we asked for. And so this is a way to show the client the what, where, when, and why of the project. And we'll talk about that here in 1 or 2 slides. It might be next. Let's see. Yes. Okay. So rather than using a project that maybe we would do like outside in the real world, I decided to focus on some projects that are being done as capstones here at UVU. So One of the projects I'm tied to is the Namibia Women's Issues Project. It's now called the Untold Narratives of Namibian Women. A lot better sounding than what I had. So let's look over the what, where, when, why, and some assumptions and exclusions. So this is a project where a few of our digital media students have traveled to Namibia, Africa, and they're working with the Namibian University down there, and there's journalism students. And so this project is in conjunction with NUST, the university, and they're going out to interview women from 12 different ethnic groups. Now, this is a 3-year project, and they're going to interview 4 ethnic groups per year. And so they knew that they were going, in the first year of this project, they knew that they were going to capture interviews and get them translated, because you're dealing with 12 ethnic groups, so that's 12 different languages. And what the digital media students were in charge of was building a website. So they're taking all that content, so audio, video, even some VR, and they're integrating it into a website. And so originally, I think they were thinking Mac Plus or an iBook, but it made more sense to do a website. And so their capstone is all based around capture and creating and building a website, so that when the year 2 and 3 students come on board, they will do the same thing, capture and add to the website. So let's look at what's all involved. So the what? The capture Namibian women's stories via audio, video, and VR. They added VR to it. Where? In country. So they're going to be traveling down there, and they'll just be doing it when? 3 weeks during our summer months, so June, July. Why? Now, this is critical, because you really need to know the why of the point of all of this. So this project is Namibian women face many unique and often misunderstood challenges. This project is to hear their stories and build a website that shares their voice to the Namibian community and world. So now you have the why. Now everybody's on the same page. They're like, this is a rallying call. Okay. I like that some people build in assumptions and exclusions, because, for example, if you're building an app and you want to include shipping, let's say the assumption is there's free shipping to all 48 states, but the exclusion would be not Alaska or Hawaii. So think about how you would use an assumption. So in this case, because it's this type of project, the assumption is the team will have sufficient time sufficient and scheduling. I could have said that better. Team will have time, sufficient amount of time and scheduling to interview these women. So there's an assumption that we have enough time out in the field to interview 4 ethnic groups. The exclusion is some women may feel uncomfortable with Americans, so we will need to be prepared to do remote interviewing techniques. Yeah, that may be a thing. Women who live in villages that don't have many interactions with white people, they might feel uncomfortable about revealing a lot of information. So how do you work around that? How do you consider the exclusions? Well, in this case, what we're focused on in our second year is remote cameras. So we'll set it all up and we'll monitor everything, but the Namibian students who will have that relationship with the interviewee, they will do the interviewing, and then we will set up a very non-invasive camera setup. And so because of that, it should be a lot more comfortable, so that for the interviewer to then go, oh, okay, you don't have a bunch of white Americans, in there. All right, let's look at another example. This is the Beit Lehi project, the archaeology one in Israel. And this is a really large project, and so digital media students can do different aspects of the entire project. So just a little bit of a background on this one. Digital media is working with the Beit Lehi Foundation to start building digital media materials and things like VR, AR, magazines, and eventually even a visitor center. So there's a lot of moving parts on this project. And so let's focus on project managing only one specific area. So in this case, this is the interactive guide. This is an app that exists on iOS. I'm not sure if it's Android yet, but students will be building onto this guide. And so the what? Build interactive guide using Mag Plus. Great. You already have what the platform is and what you're really trying to do. Where? Mag Plus and probably InDesign. Those are the two main pieces of software, or the where. When? This project is a senior project, so it will go over 2 semesters, so fall and spring, and then the handoffs occur for the subsequent students who will work on the project, because this one is an ongoing one. Why? A digital guide allows users to get up-to-date information on the Bit Leahy archaeology site, as well as a way to do a self-guided tour of the area. So the objective, the why, is essentially saying, okay, you've come to the site, you want to understand more about it. Here's not just a pamphlet, but like a pamphlet on steroids. It's going to be digital, so you can include videos, VR, all these really awesome components. And then because it's digital, you can keep adding new information because, well, it's an active archaeology site. They're going to discover a lot more. So, assumptions. Guide is for English speakers only. So right now it's only done in English. So the exclusion is it's not going to be super helpful if you don't know English. So that helps the team to understand we don't have to worry about translation. So think about these requirements. It really lays it out from a high level of the what, where, when, why, and then building out what the assumptions are. I know I said a whole thing on don't assume anything, but in this case, it's all right. So as you're thinking about requirements, what I've really tried to get across is that the more requirements that you build that are specific and understandable, not only from the client, and for the capstones, your client would essentially, you either have a client or it's also the advisor over your project. By building these requirements, you're getting rid of a lot of the gray area. So think about the quality of your requirements, and that helps really with the understanding and expectations of the project. The reason why I really want to emphasize this is that when you make a requirement that's so out there or ambiguous, it's almost meaningless. And so think about it from this perspective. I'm going to build a requirement that says, if you download this app, you're going to feel better about yourself. That's not a requirement. It's something you can't measure. And so you want to have the requirement be measurable. You want it to make sense, and you want it to say, because of this, the outcome will be this. Not, here's an emotional thing that could happen. It doesn't help anybody. So make sure that when you build them, you have concrete, purposeful requirements. Okay. This is actually from a really cool website, digital product, or dpm.com. And I really liked the visual that they had done. It's a starting point as you're building requirements. So you as a project manager are thinking, okay, we're in the beginning stages. We're trying to understand what our project is and what we're trying to accomplish. Great. You are note-taking. You are, and hopefully your team are all out there understanding what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Now, usually when you're out in the real world and you're working with a client, you're note-taking on and asking as many questions as possible. Some people have gone into these first-time client meetings and even second client meetings to understand what the client is trying to achieve. And they'll come into this meeting, instead of asking questions and getting clarification, they tell them solutions off the bat. It's terrible practice. Don't ever do that. Always ask questions first. And if you have some ideas, maybe you can say, oh, it's similar to this, but don't go any further than that. What usually happens, especially from an agency standpoint, is that you have, well, let's use Pine as an example. So the client, this is what happens when she walks by. So Pine is the client, and she has very specific needs. She wants a really awesome dry food. And she wants it to taste as good as chicken, but she wants a vegan version because this cat's a bit of a hippie, right? Yeah. Okay. So Pine wants a dry food that tastes like chicken, but it's not made of chicken. Okay. So you as a project manager are thinking, okay, great. Do you want it to taste like any other flavors? Beef, salmon, pork? And they'll say, no, right now we just want to focus on a chicken substitute. And then from there, you'll start saying, okay, chicken only. It has to be a dry food, so not a wet food. And from there, you can keep asking questions as the project goes by. Do you want it to be in a bag? Do you want it to be in a can? This is the worst analogy, but this is what happens when a cat walks by. So you're trying to grab as much information from the client as possible. Great. You have all what you think is a bunch of notes. You don't maybe have concrete requirements, but you can take it back to the creative team. And now the creative team is coming in. They're saying, great. Okay. We can make it do this. And maybe there's a corresponding app so you know how much to feed your cat based off of this and things like that. They'll start coming up with the really awesome stuff. And so you, as the project manager, are taking notes and saying, okay, basically what I'm learning from the team and what we can do, and with the notes based off of the client, I will then start pulling them together, the annotations. You're reducing it down to just some bullet points. And then you'll, of course, have to bring it to the client for them to make sure it's okay, because you can't just they give you this, the client gives you that much, and then all of a sudden you come in with that much. They don't like that. It costs them too much money. And then they'll say, great, we love the direction that you're going. You hear us. Let's go. So the project manager then builds out the requirements, and then there's a review, making sure that you're meeting them. And then you start doing the project, you building it out. And then right before you launch, you say, all right, external approval. What do you think? Does this cat food meet your expectations? Is it dry food? Is it, and does it taste like chicken? Because guess what? There's no chicken in it. Again, worst analogy, but I hope you get the idea of how it works. Next up, you have some tips of building the requirements. A mistake that I often see is not starting right away. You do want to start right away because as you're building these, you're going to forget a lot. There's a lot of information, and you might be juggling several projects. So make sure that you're always taking notes and you're organized. As you do more of these, if you do go into project management, you're going to use different templates. And maybe your company already has templates set up. That's totally possible. And when I say templates, this also means if you're using a project management tool. So at my previous work, we did have very specific templates using Workfront. And it made it easier because everyone is, with hundreds, and I'm not even kidding you, thousands of projects happening at any given time, you needed a single method of being able to track things. And so this was important. One phrase that I hear often, teamwork makes the dream work. It's true. assign requirements documentation to team members as you elicit requirements. Help by sharing your notes and arrange meetings. The more often you pull in your team and making sure everybody's on the same page, the easier it becomes, because you want them to have skin in the game. You want them to understand at any given point what they need to work on, and to get the feedback so they feel like they're contributing, and are very much involved in the process. You need that. Next, don't just record requirements, learn. So when you're looking at all the options, sorry, Pine's being obnoxious with this pencil. Maybe I can just do something with it. There you go. Anyway, so as you're putting these requirements together, maybe you weren't able to accomplish one of them, or you're having trouble accomplishing it. Learn from it. This is an opportunity for you to go, okay, let's sit back and see what's holding us back from achieving this. So do that. Keep your client in the loop. This is absolutely critical. When you're working with people, especially if it's a project over multiple weeks, even if you have nothing to report that week, always report saying, this is where we're at. This is what we've learned. Give them feedback, because if there's too much time, some clients prefer to be in the loop every couple of days. Some are fine with a week, but don't ever go more than that, personally, because I see that and it just shows, like, the client from their side, it's like, I know this team is working on something for me and I'm paying them for it, but I haven't heard where they're at, and I don't know where, like, I don't know what's happening. And so definitely communicate often with the client. Like I said, even if it's a simple email, and use email, because that's your essentially your modern day paper trail. Don't just text them or a phone call. Follow it up with an email. And last, assume your client knows nothing. So define as much as you can. For each annotation, ask why 5 times to ensure there's sound logic behind every element and functionality. I called it the 6 whys, but why are you trying to do this? Okay, now that you're trying to do this, why isn't, just build off of that. And the more you can build the major assumptions out of the project, the better defined your project is, and the better the understanding is. There's been countless experiences in my own professional life where I just assumed that I delegated this project to somebody else, that they were going to, follow up, and they dropped the ball. And so it came back on me. It made me look bad. So always just make sure you're involved, and if you have to overly communicate by saying, oh yeah, here's a recap of what just happened, this is where we're going, do that. It's very helpful. And then last is, it's the assignment. Okay. This one's going to be pretty easy, but I wanted you to go through the simple steps. First of all, choose a project you are working on. It can be a group project or individual, and just something that's happening in your digital media life. And then using the examples that I gave with the what, where, when, why, and the assumptions and exclusions, fill it in. So try to make it a little more concrete. I did a very high level version, but if you can, get a little specific, but also include context and background for me to understand. So you could say, I'm working on this audio project. This is what's involved, and then go from there. I'll have it listed out on the assignment so you can understand exactly what I'm asking for. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. All right. Thank you, and have a good day.